Hi, and welcome to the PEPP Story live show, where tonight I'm going to be bringing everything together, bringing all these little strands of the PEPP Story approach, bringing everything together in writing the speech, getting the first part of the speech written. So that's our goal tonight. So, writing the speech. Now, when I say writing a speech, I don't actually mean writing it out word for word. And I know some people are inclined to, and I've done work for chief executives where that's what they've wanted me to do. Write the speech out word for word, so then they can read it, or they can memorize it, or we can put it up on auto cue and they can read it out from auto cue. Now, I'm not going to say that isn't a way to do things, but I will say this. If you want to work with auto cue and you want to sound natural, that's a really hard challenge to do. Really, really hard. It's much harder to write it out verbatim anyway. It takes a lot of time, and you will know, there's no question about it. If you write your speech out, you will go over it and you will alter this and alter that and check this. And I have had one occasion where I completely lost my speech. In the middle of the speech, I just lost it, couldn't. And that was because I tried to memorize the speech. I'd written it out word for word. It was a speech contest, 7 minutes, had to be finished within 7.5 minutes or I was disqualified. And I lost it. I was trying to remember it. I had nobody there to prompt me, nobody to remind me what was next. It just went. And I lost the speech contest and lost a lot of my confidence. It took me a couple of years to recover from that because for me, it was a really big thing. So I don't want anyone to get in the position where they do that. And if you write out a speech, you will try to memorize it. And what will happen is you won't be able to. You'll keep going back to the script. That's what I found. Now, okay, if you're very good, if you're an actor and you can learn big chunks, and bear in mind that, a 7-minute speech is 1,000 words you have to learn, and trying to learn a 7-minute monologue, that's quite a lot of hard work. And normally as an actor, you've got somebody sitting in the wings if you're on stage to prompt you and remind you when you've missed a line, which actors do. And if you're filming it, well, okay, we just start again. But when you're live on stage in front of an audience, trying to memorize it, it's really hard. People like Billy Connolly, Eddie Izzard, they go on stage without memorized speeches. They have points that they're going through. They have worked their way through stuff, and then they just let it flow. So, and that's the same here. I've got notes which I make, which I'm here. I can see on screen, not far away from my eyes. So I know where I'm going. And sometimes you see that pop up on the screen in front. Sometimes you don't. But, that's all trying to make it look easy. It's not. There's lots of stuff going on. If this was TV, I'd have a whole team of people doing all the fiddly bits, but I've got to do it all myself. I'm getting better at it, and there's going to be more. So tonight we're going to be looking at bringing that whole essence of the purpose, experience, passion, performance, and story, bring it together and try and see what we can do to come out with a speech. And I don't like starting with a don't, but I'm going to tonight. Don't start with the PowerPoint presentation. Oh my God, I've seen this so many times. You got to do a speech. Okay, fine, I'll get my PowerPoint out. And you start writing the speech into PowerPoint. Whoa. Now, I know, it doesn't matter how much people say you don't, I know that PowerPoint helps me through a speech. I can glance at things. I know where I am. Just a simple word will remind me of what I've got to say next. If I don't use PowerPoint, then I have to use some other technique or memory trick to remind me where I'm going. Because, having an hour speech, when we're talking here now, much longer than 1,000 words. We're talking about a 5,000-7,000 word speech. Memorizing that, whoa. And if you want to, I have done a half-hour presentation at a conference where my apologies for my phone going stupid, where the organizers wanted the speech in advance. They wanted it written out. I knew it was going to be a challenge. And then they said, well, we're going to do everything by auto cue. I thought, oh, we had a big screen up there and screens on either side. But what I did was I worked on speech. So I pretty much had it memorized. Not sufficient that I would have been comfortable to try and do it. 30 minutes is a lot to memorize. But I had it pretty well sewn up. But I knew I was going to be able to read it. The important thing was that because I had spent hours and hours and hours going over and over and over it, so that I literally had it, it was pretty much committed to memory. I didn't have to read it completely. I could just glance at the screen. I had 3 screens, one big one right up in front, big, huge screen that nobody could see, but it was hanging from a balcony, and 2 big monitors down beside me. So the audience couldn't see it, but I could. But it meant I could look around and glance around as if I was looking around the audience, but actually I was just checking that I was on speech and this thing was rolling through as an auto cue. And someone came up to me afterwards and said, oh my God, thank God you didn't use auto cue like everybody else. I said, yeah, I did. Seriously? I said, yeah. Couldn't have told. Nobody could tell that I was using auto cue, but I was. But that's the problem of writing out the speech. Worse is when you start writing it out on PowerPoint. So you've got bullets after bullets after endless bullets and then reading it out. I actually was at a meeting once where somebody stood up and pressed his button and he said, my name is Joe Smith. And that was what was on the screen. And this is my colleague, and put up another slide and he read out the name. And we're here to, I thought this is good. No, surely they're not. Yeah, throughout the entire presentation, quite literally, they would read it off, little tiny bit around it, read it off. It was the most monotonous and boring presentation I have ever attended. No one was listening. Everybody was just thinking, oh, God, please let this be over soon. It doesn't work. Don't start with PowerPoint. Now, I use lots of text on PowerPoint. I'm going to show you in the next couple of days. I'm going to introduce you to some of the slides I use. They may not be the best in the world, but they work. They work for me and they work for the audience. And sometimes I use part of them as handouts, but you'll see they're actually quite complex. And there's lots of visuals and lots of diagrams and things that I do in order to help people understand. So let's get into the writing process. So this is the first thing you've got to do. Forget about PowerPoint. Don't go anywhere near it. If it's a new speech, certainly. If it's one you've done lots and lots of times before, yeah, okay, fine. You might be bringing it in. Now, one of the things I found about speeches is they're generally made up of chunks, vignettes, little bits of speech. Now, I was very active in Toastmasters International for a while. A lot of people are in Association of Speakers Clubs. And what happens there is you every week you do, well, not every week, but every so often you do a 7-minute speech. If there's a contest, you'll do a 7-minute speech. And there are 2 contests every year, speech contest, humorous one, and a sort of ordinary speech contest. And then you've got all your basic projects, your manual with 10 speech projects, each one around about 7 minutes. And that's the sort of target you're aiming for. So what happens is that you build up over a year or two, you develop a range of 7-minute speeches. And what I found was these speeches were a sort of key point, a key message, couple of points, a couple of stories, and they became chunks that I would use within my speeches. So I use them. Now, some of them never got into speeches, but they were always there. I could always pull one if I thought, oh, that would be a good, interesting bit to you. Yeah, I'll use that story and maybe a part of the Toastmaster speech. So all these little, so this is what you've got. A library of little chunks, little bits and pieces of speeches, which you can just all put and click together. And just a single word will remind you of the whole speech eventually if you tell it enough times. So that's where you can put your speech together. So first thing is, what is your message? Has to be the first thing you ask yourself. What is the message you're trying to get across? Now, I do a big keynote about transgender and non-binary people. It's quite a complex speech. Probably doesn't exactly follow the natural format because I've added to it and it's been evolved over 15 years. I know it extremely well. And every so often I have to go back to it and think, have I gone off track? how I started to look, because what happens is when you go off track of the PEPP Story approach, it starts to cease to be a good speech, because it starts to get a little bit bitty. So sometimes I have to go back and think, no, I've dropped that bit out, and I've lost the flow. So I'll go back and reconnect it and make sure it still flows. And yeah, all speakers have to do that. So what we have to constantly do is make sure that speech is still achieving objectives. Message in mind, treat everyone with dignity and respect. That's the goal. That's the message. Now, I'm particularly focusing on people who are transgender, non-binary, people who don't conform to the gender stereotype. And what I'm imploring people to do is, look, treat people with dignity and respect. Help to understand these people. I'm going to help people to understand what the challenge is, how people go through this difficult process, answer lots of questions. But at the end of the day, my message is simple. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. And that's not just about trans people. That's about people who are gay, people who are lesbian, people who don't conform in some way to the gender binary, or people who are disabled, people who are black, people who are Muslim, people who are Jewish. We've got to treat everyone with dignity and respect and start to understand them. I focus specifically on the gender issues, but the message is a broader one. So can you see that's my whole message? My sort of sense of purpose is trying to help to create a fairer world. That's what I want to see. I want to see a world that is fairer. And that's what equality and diversity is all about. Equality is about fairness. Diversity is about difference. So it's all about equality. Diversity is about accepting difference. So that's the measures. That's what my learning process from having changed gender and gone through that process. So I've got my message. So then we're going to go into our opening. How are you going to open your speech once you've got your message? Now, remember that the whole idea of the opening is to start to sell people on this message. Now, you may not actually state your message. You might leave the actual message, but you're going to get the sense of the message so people start to very quickly understand what this is about. So sometimes I will blatantly state it. Sometimes I will just make people aware of what it means to not be treated with dignity and respect. So people say, hey, that's wrong. Yeah, you should treat people with dignity. So if I've got the audience beginning to say, you should treat people with dignity and respect, before I even say it, I know that they've already bought into where I'm going. So when we get to the end, they're going to say, absolutely. Yeah. So I start then. I have a simple thing. Is it a boy or a girl? Start a lot of my speeches with that simple statement. Is it a boy or a girl? First question everyone wants to know. The moment we're born, in fact, even before we're born, at the 3-month, at the 12-week scan, we're already planning the gender reveal party, where we will reveal to the world what gender this child is going to be, so that by the time the baby actually arrives, their world is already totally and completely gendered, pink or blue, boy or girl. Expectations, everything have all been set. Fairness has gone. We're not treating someone with dignity and respect by pushing them into this enforced gender, this sense of because you are one boy or because you're a boy or because you're a girl, this is the path that you will lead and it's totally different. How does that create fairness? How can we end up with a world which is treating people with dignity? How can we end up with a fair world when from the moment we start, we're being treated as different? So can you see that's the sense of my opening? And we'll go into when I was 6 and how life was for me not conforming, and how life was for other people, the things around me that I saw. So can you see, I'm going to take you on a journey that starts to make you think, oh my God, that really isn't fair. So that sense of create a fairer world is in all the time. It's underlying. That's my personal mission coming into it. In my speech, it's about treating with dignity and respect. So I've got my opening. I've got a set for where we're going to go. Now we've got to get into the body. What's the body of the good? Well, the opening, I've actually started to stray from the opening into the first of the 3 points, because the body is going to be largely 3 points, and it can be quite big points. It isn't just about having a point one, point two. You may not notice when we move from one to one, but I'm going to gently take us through, and essentially you're going to have, you can get the basic structure: the past, the present, the future. That might be your 3 keys, the 3 elements that you're going to talk about. What things were like, what things are like today, how things are going to be in the future. Boom, boom, boom. 3 simple things. But, there are lots of ways you can build this up, and so it all depends on your speech. I'm not going to give too many examples because that would be a challenge. By the way, if you want to, please do. Put questions in and pose questions here. I'm more than happy to pick those up in future shows. So just put in the comments any question, and I will pick that up on a future show and deal with that. So, got 3 points. Now, what do I deal with? Growing up trans and non-binary. That's my first part. Then I start to look at what is the difference between sex and gender. Why do we get those confused? How does that cause problem? And what it all means. And then we look in the final thing: how can you be more inclusive? Because that's the ultimate game. Treating people with dignity and respect is about becoming more inclusive, about people who are different. So can you see that's now, this is a 1 hour, hour and a half day event, but it still broadly falls down into those 3 points. And then we come to the conclusion. How do we finish off? Well, I want to really state my message so it's very, very clear. I might want to bring you into a call to action. Sometimes it's more of an informative and awareness talk. But what I do is I use a personal hate crime experience. It's quite a big story, bigger than I can tell tonight. I might look at it another time. But it's a story about the way in which I was treated by some kids and how I brought that to a conclusion. I've talked about it in one of the previous shows. And I've used it, and I use it in all sorts of ways, but I tend to use it as a close if I'm doing a keynote speech, because it's a big story, and it gets people, a bit gripped to see what's going on. So that's the basic story. So now I can start to think, okay, what props, slides, video clips, engagement, what can I use to help get my message across? So all the way through, I'm looking, I'm going to talk about this. So I will build and start to construct my speech. And some of it I find helps to have some images. Some of it helps to just get rid of the images and just talk. But in the main, I tend to use a lot of images, a lot of slides. Some are just visuals, some are words. Sometimes I use huge amounts of words, but it's actually done in a way that is about for humor, and it's not intended for you to read it all. It's actually intended just to give a sort of, well, I won't give it away too much, because I'm going to show you tomorrow some of those slides and some of the ways in which slides and some of the ways in which I use them. So there we are. This is what to do. Think about this. Go and put together your presentation. Think about, what is your main message? What are the 3 key points that you want to make? How are you going to build this structure? What are you might have a big story about facts and figures and details, and might have a story about somebody who's benefited from your help. What you determine what it is. But remember, just 3 key points. Explore those, expand them, facts, stories, to make it into a piece on its own. And you'll see how the slides I use tomorrow help to pull mine together. But that's the basics of how we're going to do it. So join me tomorrow, day 21, 3 weeks. Goodness me, 3 weeks of running this. Don't forget, if you're looking for some coaching, wanting some help to try and put a speech together, get a TEDx talk together, whatever, I'm offering a free 30-minute introductory session. Just drop me a line at ricky@rickyarundel.com, and we'll fix something up. I'm doing quite a lot of speaker coaching at the moment, so I'll be more than happy to work with you. And so join me tomorrow when we will be looking at slides and how we're going to put those slides into our presentation. Take care. See you tomorrow.